Paolo Banchero just had the best month of basketball he's ever played, and we're finally starting to see some sustained version of what he looked like in those 5 games to open the season. Really, I'd say it's been more like a month and a half of truly elite play. Since returning from the All-Star break, he's looked 100% healthy, and the amount of offense he's been producing in spite of the team around him suggests that his ceiling might actually be higher than you think. To say that the Magic lack three-point shooting would be a major understatement. Here's a look at every team's three-point shooting, both in terms of volume and efficiency, and here's where the Magic land, barely making over 30% of their outside shots. Of their top 10 leaders in minutes on the season, not a single player has made more than 35% of their threes, and 4 fall below 30%. It's bad. And as a result, defenses are able to get away with all sorts of different tactics. Just look at the lack of space. When Paolo tries to drive down the middle, he's met by aggressive help at the nail, so he picks up his dribble, kicks it out, and resets for another touch. Then when he tries attacking again, now there isn't just help at the nail, but a strong side rim protector parked on the block, so instead of getting to the paint, he's forced to settle for a step back jumper. Or how about this one against the Raptors? When he attacks from the corner, quite literally the entire defense is focused on him, and by the time he's getting into a shot, all 5 defenders are touching the paint. Toronto threw literally everything at him. Anytime he tried to set up from an empty corner, the low man would immediately cheat over to the strong side as soon as he caught the ball, leaving him with nowhere to go on a drive but over the top of a contest. He's developed some nasty counters to these coverages. This time they send a double from the baseline, so he fakes a drive left before spinning to the middle for an angle to finish. But those opportunities aren't always there. Here the Hawks are in a straight up box and one, with defenders parked on both blocks and more help coming from the nail, meaning that the best shot he can get to is a floater from about 12 feet out. And this is especially difficult against teams who have elite rim protectors, such as the Bucks with Giannis. Watch how he patrols the paint like a free safety, which again forces Paolo to find a shot over the top. Now compare that to a play from earlier in the game where Giannis is late stepping over to the paint. Paolo finally has space to attack and gets to a layup. He usually doesn't have much trouble beating whoever's defending him. He's big and powerful with a great first step. The problem is that anytime he gets around his defender, he's then forced to be a shot blocker in the paint. And I'd say this right here is arguably his most impressive quality, because despite having some of the worst looks inside of 5 feet, he still finds ways to put the ball in the basket efficiently. This season, he's shooting over 67% at the rim on about 5.5 attempts every 75 possessions. The only other players to exceed both of those marks while having less than half of their shots assisted on are Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, LeBron James, and Giannis. So pretty good company if you ask me. Remember though, that also includes the stretch where he was very clearly playing hurt. It's a smaller sample since the All-Star break, but I'd argue it's more indicative of the level he's at right now. Over his past 21 games, he's shooting almost 71% at the rim on about 6 attempts per 75, which is the type of profile you'd expect from an elite interior scorer. And that's how I'd label Paolo. He's very crafty around the rim with the types of angles he gets to, and he's got really nice touch on layups. He also uses his length extremely well to create separation from the floor, often going to Euro steps or slow steps to avoid shot blockers. With that said though, his best attribute around the basket is his strength and how that allows him to just power through anyone who stands in his way. He's got a huge frame and is undoubtedly one of the strongest players in the NBA, which when paired with his craft allows him to bulldoze his way into layups. And a packed paint starts to matter a little less when you're capable of discarding every defender in front of you en route to a finish. That strength is the foundation for his entire game. Because shot blockers are typically parked in front of the basket, he has to find ways to create space over the top of the defense. His go-to move for creating that space is to simply drop the shoulder, as there isn't a defender in the league who can consistently hold their ground. at least not without playing overly physical and initiating contact themselves, which then sends Paolo to the line a lot. Again, if we look at the stretch he's played since the All-Star break, he's averaging over 10 free throw attempts every 75 possessions. The only player in the NBA getting to the line more is Giannis, and what makes Paolo's free throws especially terrifying is that he's now starting to make them consistently. It looks like he's sped up his routine a bit, and I'm not sure if that's been the cause of the improved accuracy or if it's just a small sample of shooting luck, but whatever the case may be, it's been a tale of two seasons from the line. Before the break, he was making just 65% of his free throws, and since the break, that number jumped all the way up to about 79%. If Paolo's making almost 80% of his free throws, there's basically nothing you can do to stop him from scoring one-on-one. Not that there was much defenders could do anyways, because in the rare event that he does find himself isolated without a packed paint, he's an absolute force. He's just too big, too strong, and too skilled, so with one man to beat, he's gonna get a good shot off. And that means the Magic have to find ways to put him in those isolated situations, which could mean an early offense before the defense is able to properly set. He's not super fast, but thanks to the power, he's an absolute freight train in the open floor. It's nearly impossible to stop him from touching the paint when he's got a head of steam, because even if a defender's able to cut him off, he's going right through them like they don't exist. Remember what I said earlier about the craft though? In addition to the bully ball, he can use those long strides to attack space and create openings to the rim. One move he especially likes is this misdirection gather step, where he jabs in one direction before accelerating in the opposite one to throw a defender off balance. And he can get really creative with these. This is the exact same move, except he secures the ball by putting it behind his back before finishing through contact. Alongside guys like Giannis and LeBron, Paolo's one of the most devastating downhill scorers in the NBA, which is why it's an absolute travesty that the Magic don't make more of an effort to get out and run. They're one of the best defensive teams in the league, yet for whatever reason, they basically never turn those into transition opportunities outside of the occasional grab and go from either Paolo or Franz. As a team, they're averaging about 15.6 seconds per possession, making them the slowest team in the league. So in a way, Paolo's almost being handicapped, as one of the only ways to counteract that severe lack of shooting is to play faster, yet nobody plays slower, meaning that he quite literally has to get everything out of the mud. With that said, there are things that they do in the half court to put him in more favorable situations, such as using him as a ball handler in inverted pick and rolls. Sure, there's still going to be a rim protector parked under the basket at all times, but at least with a smaller defender switched onto him, it's a lot easier to create space and score over the top. And because he's such a big mismatch, most defenses will avoid the switch altogether by putting two on the ball, which then puts him in a position to create advantages for the guys around him. Those advantages aren't always valuable though. Like on this one, he draws the hedge, but a third defender's already camped in the paint, so a pass to the rolling wing probably wouldn't lead to much. And that's usually when he'll call his own number as an outside shooter. I'm honestly not too sure how to feel about his three-point shooting. On one hand, he's always been a relatively low percentage guy, making just 32% of his career threes, and 5 or 6 attempts a game is probably a little high for that caliber of shooter, but on the other hand, I'm glad that he's not afraid to take those shots when given space, and he does have the occasional moments where he goes on a heater, like in last year's playoffs against the Cavs. I'll keep reiterating the point that due to the way defenses zone up his driving lanes, sometimes a pull-up three is the best shot he can get to, and he's actually really good at creating separation. He's got the height to shoot over anyone, and with the way he uses his handle to get defenders leaning towards the paint before stepping back, I wouldn't be surprised if this one day becomes a more reliable part of his game. Think about it this way. As a rookie, he shot 26% on pull-up threes, and in the past 2 seasons, he's been at about 31 to 32%. Hypothetically, if he were able to get that to just 34%, it may seem like a marginal improvement, but in the scope of team offense, that's worth about 0.06 points per possession, which is actually the current difference between Boston's number 2 half-court offense and the league average. That's more speculation though, and for now, I just think the 3-point shot is something he feels he's forced to fall back on because the team doesn't have anyone else to take those shots, and he doesn't really have space to get to his spots inside the arc. With all of that said, when Paolo finds himself operating with a lack of space, more times than not, he's looking to get to the mid-range. This season, he's 10th in the NBA in volume with 9.5 mid-range attempts per 75, but much like the 3-point shooting, the accuracy lacks a bit behind, landing in just the 45th percentile at about 42% on these shots. I feel a lot differently about his progression as a mid-range shooter based off of what we've seen though. For starters, the flashes of hot shooting have been far more consistent inside the arc, with the most notable one again being last year's playoffs against Cleveland. And I wouldn't say he's on a heater right now, but he has been a lot better since the All-Star break, shooting over 44% in those last 21 games. Considering that huge leap he had from the free throw line as well, it's possible that he's taken a legitimate shooting leap. We'll just have to wait and see what happens as the sample size continues to grow. The main reason I feel so confident in a leap from the mid-range though is that he basically already has the entire bag for creating these shots out of any situation. When walking down his defender with a live dribble, he can throw a hanging hesitation dribble straight into a pull-up jumper. And if he wants a little more space, that's when you'll see him go to one of those shoulder bumps, moving Jimmy Butler a good 5 feet to set up this one. That strength unlocks the entire mid-range for him. Out of drives, he'll often bump his defender while coming to a stop, which is basically guaranteed to create a ton of separation, and if he ever commits to one of those shoulder bumps but finds himself off balance, he can regather from the pivot and turn around for a fadeaway. That's a shot he's comfortable getting to over either shoulder. This time he goes into Draymond's chest while spinning left, only to stop that spin halfway through and turn back to his right before rising up. And remember, he's 6'10", so no matter how well he's played, he can access these shots quite literally whenever he wants. I think the biggest factor in determining his ceiling as a player is just how good of a mid-range shooter he ends up being. If he gets up to 44% over an entire season, or even up to 46 or 47%, now we're looking at a really strong mid-range shooter who gets to the rim and the free throw line more than almost anyone in the league. That's a pretty scary player. I do think the volume from mid-range is a bit high right now, which probably has a lot to do with the spacing, but Paolo's not completely devoid of blame here. On a play like this where he has a head of steam and help is stepping up to him, I'd love to see him drop that shoulder and bully his way to the rim instead of stopping short for a pull-up. It does feel like he lets the defense off the hook sometimes. Here's one where he starts a drive and draws not 2, but 3 defenders into his lane, and I understand there's a lack of shooting, but I think a skip pass to either one of Cole Anthony or Franz Wagner on the weak side would lead to better results than stepping back into a smothered jumper. It's easy to understand why he feels the need to take these shots, but when the entire defense is honed in on him like this, I want to see just a little bit more trust in his teammates to catch the ball and attack a tilted defense, especially with how good of a slasher Franz is. I don't want to make it sound like he's not a willing passer though. Actually, I'd make the case that his playmaking is the most underrated aspect of his game, because he generates so much downhill pressure and defenses are so worried about whatever he's doing, there's almost always an open shooter. It's just a matter of whether or not they'll actually hit the shot. It's pretty clear how quickly he processes the defense. Here's a drive where he goes to that shoulder bump while turning around, and Nurkic is getting ready to commit to the ball, which Paolo reacts to instantly by finding the open man on the opposite wing. Imagine if this was a 40% shooter. He's even started to add some manipulation into these finds. On this one, Anthony Black frees up in the paint, and he stares him down while faking a pass to freeze this defender before skipping it to Jett Howard, who's left with space to shoot from the corner. This added manipulation has also helped him find more passes in that packed interior. When he draws two on a drive, he stares down KCP in the corner, which makes both Brown and Tatum hold their positions in the gaps, only to fire a bullet to Carter Jr. under the basket. The only read that I'd say he struggles to find consistently is a downhill lob. In a situation like this where a rim protector's stepping up to him and the low man is late sliding to the dunker, that should be an automatic lob, yet he instead tries to drive through traffic. If this becomes a pass that he throws more times than not, that's another layer being added to an already devastating downhill attack. For all of the live dribble kickouts and dump-offs out of drives though, I feel pretty confident saying that his best passes are made with his back to the basket. He's a really quick decision maker out of the post, and there isn't a read he can't make to counter any defensive look thrown his way. Anytime he touches the ball, the defense is either loading up in the paint or coming with an immediate double, and he counters by searching every inch of the floor for the right skip pass. And when I say every inch, I mean that literally. This time he's deep in the left corner and floats an absolute beauty of a skip pass right to KCP's shooting pocket in the opposite corner. I can't wait to see him in a situation with multiple floor spacers because it feels like he basically never misses these reads, which means that a post touch for Paolo is automatically going to lead to good team offense. Don't forget that he can call his own number as a scorer in these spots as well. Like I said, he can turn over either shoulder for fadeaway jumpers, which is his natural go-to. To be fair, that's sometimes all he can get to because of how defenses pack the paint, and every now and then we get a glimpse of what it could look like if defenses had to think twice, and it's pretty much everything you'd expect from someone that big and skilled. I actually think most of Paolo's untapped potential is within these traditional big man skills. He's got a classic old man's face-up game from the 4 where he'll use jab steps to set up mid-range jumpers, or he'll use the threat of that jumper to weaponize his first step and instead look for offense near the basket. Something else that he's already elite at is sealing off inside position in the low post, which not only puts him in a spot to receive entry passes for quick offense, it puts him in a spot to crash the offensive glass and create second chance opportunities. Stuff like this makes you think about what he'd look like playing the 5, or at least sharing the floor with a higher level stretch big. He's just so physically overwhelming that once he catches the ball in the paint, there really isn't much the defense can do. Well, unless the defense features elite rim protection, because this is yet another area of his game that's currently being handicapped by the fact that opposing bigs can just abandon the perimeter. It's no secret that he's at his best when attacking downhill though, and another way to create those opportunities is by using him as a screener. If he catches the ball in the short roll with space to attack, good luck stopping him from getting to the rim. The passing makes him especially tough to defend out of the short roll like this. Rim protectors have to commit to him, and he'll routinely find the big man on these drop-offs. Again, I want you to imagine what this looks like if he adds the lob as a consistent read. That's a 2-on-1 situation that no shot blocker wants any part of. And that would also make things easier for him as a scorer, because if shot blockers have to worry about the lob, they might be a little less hesitant committing to these short roll attacks. All things considered, I actually think Paolo's at his best as an off-ball player when he's operating like a small ball 5. From the deep inside seals to the screen and roll game, he generates a lot of pressure as an interior scoring threat. But with Orlando's lack of shooting, he's basically forced into a position where he has to be a floor spacer, so he and Franz end up playing the your turn, my turn style of offense. Like I said earlier, I don't think he's necessarily a bad shooter, and he has pretty good instincts for moving without the ball. I just think spotting him up on the wing limits his impact. It feels like they're going for a Boston style of offense with the driving and kicking. The only problem is that even if he beats a closeout, where exactly is he supposed to go? I guess that takes us back to square one, the root of Paolo and this team's issues. the fact that they just simply do not have enough shooting on the floor. I do want to give a quick shout out to Caleb Houston and Corey Joseph, two guys who have been given more playing time and have shot pretty well from downtown. When you have not one, but two elite downhill forwards who can finish in a variety of ways and consistently find the open man though, you're gonna need more shooting than that. Luckily, Paolo's only 22 years old, so they have a ton of time to figure it out, and I'd say the situation he's been forced into has both its pros and cons. On the con side, his efficiency hasn't been the greatest to start his career, and Orlando's been a bad team offense. You also don't want him building bad habits as a decision maker just because he gets so used to playing without space that when he finally gets it, he still instinctually relies on a tougher shot diet. Then the final con is that I don't think he's had the opportunity to develop some of those other skills I talked about, like his screen and roll game or his low post scoring. However, on the pro side, he's had to develop all sorts of different counters and skills that could just make his ceiling that much higher as an on-ball creator. The finishing through contact, the mid-range shot creation, the interior passing reads. Don't get me wrong, he's still a flawed player, but since the All-Star break, he's been nothing short of elite. In those 21 games, he's averaging 29 points, 4 assists, and 3 turnovers a game on 59% true shooting. That's really impressive production for someone who you could argue is in the worst possible situation for his current skill set. Over the years, I'd expect him to improve his passing, notably with the lob. I think there's room to grow as both a mid-range and three-point shooter. I think there's a world of untapped potential away from the ball, and if the team ever gets a good amount of outside shooting and decides to stop walking up the court like snails, what he already excels at will only become more prominent. So moving forward, I suggest you buy as much stock in Paolo Banchero as you possibly can, because I think we're watching the evolution of one of the NBA's next major superstars. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Paolo. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.